stripped her name from the pack register at dawn. Isla Thorne stood barefoot on frozen ground while her brother read the decree. The words carried across Ashwood territory like smoke from a funeral pyre. Wolfless, defective, a stain upon the bloodline. The crowd had gathered in the pre-dawn cold, their breath forming clouds in the Montana air, and she could smell their anticipation. They had waited years for this moment. Alpha Cale Thorne stood on the stone platform with his Luna Vivian beside him, both of them golden and perfect in the first light, breaking over the Rocky Mountains. His voice never wavered as he spoke the ancient words of exile. No trial, no council of elders, no mercy for the sister who had shared his childhood, who had bandaged his scraped knees and hidden his mistakes from their father's wrath. By the authority vested in me as Alpha of Ashwood Pack, Cale said, and his eyes were flat as river stones, cold and unblinking. I hereby sever all bonds between this pack and the one who bears no wolf. Let her name be struck from our records. Let her scent be forgotten. Let her walk beyond our borders and never return. The crowd began to chant, defective, curse, abomination. The words had weight, physical force, and Isla felt each one land like a stone against her ribs. She wore the dress she had slept in, thin cotton that did nothing against the September cold at this altitude. Her feet were bare because they had come for her before sunrise, dragging her from the supply shed behind the stables where she had lived for 3 years, like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. Her fingers found the wolf fang necklace at her throat. The leather cord rested familiar against her skin, and the yellowed fangs seemed to pulse with ancient rhythm. Her mother had worn this every day of her life. Elena, who had died when Isla was 17, had pressed it into her daughter's palm on her deathbed and whispered words that Isla still carried like a second heartbeat. You carry more than you know. Promise me you won't let them make you small. Isla lifted her chin. She would not cry. Crying required the belief that someone in this crowd might care, and she had abandoned that belief the day her wolf failed to come. Age 12, 13, 14, 15. She had waited through each birthday while the other children shifted for the first time, their bodies breaking and reforming into something powerful and whole. She had waited until waiting became its own quiet form of dying. The chanting grew louder. A woman in the front row spat at Isla's feet. A man she had known since childhood, whose saddle she had mended just last week, turned his back with theatrical disgust. And through it all, Cale stood on his platform like a statue of judgment, his hand resting on the pommel of the ceremonial blade he would never need to draw. Isla began to walk. The crowd parted before her, a corridor of contempt leading to the territory markers at the forest edge. 200 yards. She counted her steps to keep from counting the faces. 30 steps. 50. At 73, a child no older than 8 threw a stone that struck her shoulder blade hard enough to bruise. At 91, someone grabbed at her dress, tearing the sleeve. She did not stop, did not look back. The wolf fang necklace grew hotter against her throat. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, it flared with golden light. Only one person saw it. An elderly woman standing at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in furs despite the season, with eyes the color of winter sky. The woman's face registered something between shock and recognition before Isla passed beyond the markers and into Thornridge Forest, where no exile had ever survived a single winter alone. The trees swallowed her whole. Thornridge was not simply an unclaimed territory. It was a wound in the landscape, a place where the forest grew thick and hostile, where the undergrowth cut like razors, and the earth itself seemed designed to reject human presence. The wolves here were feral, their minds broken by moon madness, and their howls at night carried no language, only hunger. Isla walked for 3 hours before her feet began to bleed. The forest floor was a carpet of pine needles and broken branches, and she had no shoes, no supplies, nothing but the torn dress on her back and the necklace against her skin. The September sun barely penetrated the canopy above, and the temperature had already dropped to somewhere in the low 50s. She knew she was going to die out here. The knowledge sat in her chest like a stone, cold and certain. No one survived Thornridge. The forest killed you with cold or hunger, or the feral packs that roamed between the trees. The only question was which would take her first. But if she was going to die, she would die on her feet, walking forward, refusing to make it easy for the forest, or her brother, or the moon goddess who had looked at Isla Thorne and decided she was not worth the gift of a wolf. At the 4-mile mark, she found the cabin. It was barely standing. The structure leaned to one side like a drunk, the roof sagging in the middle where a support beam had rotted through. One window had shattered inward, leaving teeth of glass jutting from the frame. The door hung crooked on leather hinges that had dried and cracked with age. But it was shelter, and shelter was the difference between dying tonight and dying tomorrow. Isla pushed the door open with her shoulder. It groaned like something in pain, but gave way. Inside the cabin was a single room, maybe 12 feet by 12, with a stone hearth along one wall and a sleeping platform that had collapsed at one end. Dead leaves covered the floor in drifts. Animal droppings small and dark were scattered near what had once been a storage alcove. The smell was overwhelming damp earth and mildew and something faintly metallic that might have been old blood from whatever creature had died beneath the floorboards in seasons past. She pressed her palm flat against the doorframe, testing for structural give. The wood was soft with rot, but not completely compromised. The cabin had stood through winters before. It might stand through one more. She looked at her hands already blistered from gripping tree branches to keep her balance during the walk. Her feet were torn and filthy. Her body had already begun to thin. "Good enough," she said aloud. "I've survived worse than bad architecture." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that kept you moving. For 3 years, Isla had lived at the edge of Ashwood territory in a supply shed behind the pack stables. The shed was 8 feet by 6 with a dirt floor and gaps in the walls that let in snow during winter. She had slept on horse blankets that smelled of sweat and hay. She had eaten whatever the Omega kitchen workers left on the back stoop after evening meals, cold stew and stale bread, and sometimes nothing at all. She had scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. She had mended saddles and boiled linens and hauled water from the creek, and she had never once complained. Not because she was meek. Complaining required someone willing to listen, and there was no one. Her wolf had never come. Every shifter in the Northern Territories received their wolf spirit between the ages of 12 and 15. It arrived like a second heartbeat, sudden and primal and undeniable. The shift itself was agony, bones cracking and reshaping muscles, tearing and reforming the spine, elongating into something ancient and powerful. But afterward, you were whole. You were pack. You belonged. Isla had waited through her 12th year, then her 13th, 14th, 15th. She had waited through the pitying glances that hardened into suspicion, through the whispered consultations between healers who prodded her chest and temples and declared her spiritually barren. She had waited until the waiting itself became unbearable. Her brother Kyle had received his wolf at 13, a massive silver beast with eyes that made the pack elders gasp with reverence. He was alpha material from the first shift, powerful and controlled in ways that spoke of destiny. Their father, the old alpha, had wept with pride that night. He had thrown a feast that lasted 3 days. He had not wept for Isla. He had simply stopped looking at her. Now alone in the Thornridge cabin, Isla began pulling apart the collapsed sleeping platform with her bare hands. The wood was old, but not completely rotten. She could use the planks to board up the broken window. She could use the rope to make snares if she could remember the diagrams from the books she had studied in the pack library back when she was still permitted inside. Her hands worked while her mind drifted. She thought about her mother. Elena had been beautiful, dark-haired, and green-eyed with a smile that could light up a room. She had also been the finest healer Ashwood had ever produced, able to diagnose illness with a touch and mix remedies that could pull wolves back from the edge of death. Elena had been the only person who touched Isla's face with gentleness after the wolf failed to come. On her deathbed 7 years ago, Elena had pressed the wolf fang necklace into Isla's palm. The fang was old, yellowed with age, strung on a braided leather cord that had been repaired and rebraided a dozen times. "This belonged to my grandmother," Elena had whispered, "and her grandmother before her. It carries something, Isla, something the pack has forgotten. Promise me you won't let them make you small. You carry more than you know." Those had been her last words. She died that night with the autumn moon full in the window, and Isla had fastened the necklace around her own throat and never taken it off. Now, in the failing light of the Thornridge cabin, Isla held the fang up to examine it. The tooth was 4 inches long, curved and sharp, clearly from a massive wolf. But it was the color that caught her attention. In the dim light filtering through the broken window, the fang seemed to glow faintly, a soft golden luminescence that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She fastened it back around her neck. The fang settled in the hollow of her throat, vibrating faintly with each heartbeat, and for just a moment a warmth bloomed beneath her ribs. Not a wolf, not the tearing, reforming agony of a first shift, just a presence ancient and patient, like something had been sleeping inside her bones for 24 years and was finally beginning to wake. The first night nearly killed her. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit after sunset. Isla had managed to board up the broken window using planks from the sleeping platform and strips of her torn dress to tie them in place. She had gathered every dead leaf in the cabin and piled them in the corner for insulation. She had curled into the smallest ball possible, arms wrapped around her knees, and tried to generate warmth through sheer force of will. It wasn't enough. By midnight, she was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. Her feet had gone numb hours ago. Her fingers were blue-white and barely responsive. She could feel hypothermia creeping in, could feel her body beginning to shut down. And then she heard the howling. It started far away, a broken sound that held no language, no pack structure, no intelligence. Just hunger and madness. Feral wolves. At least 3 of them, maybe more, and they were moving through the forest toward the cabin. Isla forced herself to stand. Her legs nearly gave out, but she caught herself against the wall and stumbled to the door. She had wedged it shut with fallen timber from outside a makeshift barricade that would not stop a determined feral but might slow one down. The howling grew closer. She could hear them now, not just their voices but their movement through the undergrowth, the crack of branches and the rustle of disturbed leaves. 3 of them, no 4, moving fast. The necklace was hot now, almost burning, and the golden glow was visible even in the darkness. Her chest felt strange, tight and full, as if something inside her was pushing outward, trying to break free. The first feral hit the door like a battering ram. The timber barricade held but barely. Isla heard wood crack, heard the creature on the other side snarling and scrabbling at the frame. A second one joined it. Then a third. The door shook with each impact, and Isla knew it was only a matter of time. She backed into the corner, her eyes fixed on the door, her heart hammering so hard it felt like her ribs might crack. This was how she would die, torn apart by feral wolves in a collapsing cabin 4.8 miles from the territory that had cast her out. The door splintered, a massive paw thrust through the gap, claws raking the air. The feral wolf on the other side was huge, easily 200 pounds, with matted gray fur and eyes that reflected the faint moonlight with an unholy yellow glow. Its jaws snapped and saliva dripped from teeth designed to tear through muscle and bone. Isla opened her mouth. She meant to scream, but what came out was something else entirely. Bad dog. The words erupted from her chest with a force that seemed impossible. They carried weight, physical presence, and the wolf fang necklace blazed with golden light so bright it turned the cabin interior into midday. The light pulsed outward in a visible wave, and when it hit the feral wolf, the creature froze. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. The feral stood perfectly still, its paw still thrust through the broken door, its yellow eyes suddenly wide and almost aware. Then it whimpered. A sound Isla had never heard a wolf make, high and frightened and utterly submissive. The creature pulled its paw back, dropped to its belly, and crawled backward into the darkness. The other ferals scattered. She heard them crashing through the underbrush, their howls fading into the distance, and then there was only silence. Isla stared at her hands. They were shaking, but not from cold anymore. The necklace had dimmed to its usual faint glow, and the strange pressure in her chest had eased. She had no idea what had just happened, but she was alive. She slid down the wall to the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and for the first time since her exile allowed herself to cry. Not from despair, from something far more dangerous. Hope. The weeks that followed established a brutal rhythm. Isla learned to set snares from memory, fashioning traps from green branches and strips of fabric. The first week she caught nothing. The second week, a rabbit. She killed it with a rock and ate it raw because she had no way to make fire. The meat made her sick for 2 days, but she kept it down. She found a freshwater stream half a mile east of the cabin, following the sound of running water. The stream was ice cold, and she hauled water back in a cracked clay pot she had salvaged from the hearth. It took 40 minutes to make the round trip. She made it twice a day every day until the path was worn smooth. She foraged mushrooms, identifying them by illustrations she remembered. Chanterelles beneath the pines. Wild garlic. Dandelion greens, bitter and tough, but edible. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her body thin, then toughened. She learned to read the forest. The birds went silent 30 seconds before a predator moved through the undergrowth. The air pressure dropped hours before a rainstorm. She could smell water from 100 yards when the wind was right. And something in her chest seemed to orient itself toward living things with an almost magnetic pull. She did not understand it. She filed it away. The pendant lay against her throat, a constant presence. At night, when the feral howls rose, she steadied her breathing and reminded herself she was alive. She was alone, and for the first time in her life, no one was telling her she was worthless for it. On the 43rd day, she found the rabbit outside her cabin door, already dead and cleaned, internal organs removed with surgical precision. The meat was still warm. Someone had killed this within the last hour and left it for her like an offering. Isla picked up the rabbit and turned in a slow circle, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but she could feel it now, that magnetic pull in her chest pointing towards something large and alive and watching from the shadows. "Thank you," she said to the forest, "whoever you are." No answer. But when she walked to the stream that afternoon, she found a new path cleared through the thorn vines. And when a late-season storm rolled in that night, she woke to find heavy leather tarps draped over her woodpile, keeping everything dry. Someone was watching, someone powerful enough to move through Thornridge without fear. Someone who had decided Isla Thorne was worth keeping alive. On day 63, she found the hair caught on pine bark near the stream. A single strand nearly 6 inches long and impossibly thick. Black as midnight, with a texture that was clearly wolf fur, but far too large to come from any normal pack member. This was not a feral. Ferals were broken, their coats matted and dull. This hair was pristine groomed, and it belonged to a wolf of extraordinary size. Why? Isla asked the tree, the forest, the invisible watcher. Why help me? The forest gave no answer. But that night, for the first time since her exile, Isla slept without fear. She dreamed of eyes like old whiskey and a voice like distant thunder, and when she woke, the pendant blazed, painting the cabin walls in liquid gold. By day 90, Isla had stopped waiting to die. She had established a routine. Wake at first light, check the snares, haul water, forage, return to the cabin, repair whatever had broken overnight, eat, sleep, survive. Her body had changed. She had always been slight. Now her arms were corded with lean muscle. Her legs could carry her miles without tiring. Her hands were rough and competent. But the other changes frightened her, the awareness that grew stronger every day. The way animals responded to her voice, not just the ferals, but the deer and foxes and even the birds. She began to talk to the watcher. I know you're there, she said on day 87. I know you've been watching. If you wanted me dead, I'd be easy prey. If you want something else, stop hiding. Nothing. But the next morning, there were 3 rabbits outside her door instead of 1. And when she laughed, surprised and delighted, she swore she heard an answering rumble from somewhere deep in the forest, almost like laughter. On day 94, the watcher finally came. It was late September, and the nights had begun to drop into the low 20s. Isla had spent the day winterizing the cabin, stuffing gaps with moss and mud, reinforcing the roof supports. She had built a small fire in the hearth, coaxing flames from damp kindling. The fire was fragile, more smoke than heat, but it was enough. She sat cross-legged in front of it, feeding in twigs one at a time, and tried not to think about winter. Outside, rain hammered the cabin's patched roof. Water dripped into the tin cup she had placed beneath the worst leak. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing. Then came the knock. 3 strikes on the door, heavy and deliberate. The sound of a fist that could have punched through the wood, but chose not to. Isla's hand found the hunting knife she had fashioned from scrap metal. She rose silently and pressed her ear to the door. The scent hit her first. Pine resin, iron, wood smoke, and beneath it something raw and primal that made every hair on her body stand straight. Alpha. Not just any alpha. Something older, bigger, more concentrated. A scent so dense with dominance it made her teeth ache. Open the door, said a voice from the other side, low, unhurried, so deep it seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. I can hear your heartbeat. I know you're standing right there. Isla's grip tightened on the knife. Who are you? A pause. Rain, the drip of water. Then, I am Declan Blackmore, High Alpha King of the Northern Territories. I was told you're alone out here. I've come a long way. Let me in, woman. She opened the door because refusing an Alpha King was not a survivable option. The man who filled the door frame was not merely large. He was a geological event. 6 feet 11 inches tall, easily 340 pounds, with shoulders broad enough to block the rain behind him. His hair was black and rain-plastered to a hard jaw. His eyes were the deep amber of old whiskey wolf light burning in their depths. He looked at her. All of her. From her bare feet to her tangled dark hair to the knife in her white-knuckled grip. And something shifted behind those eyes. Recognition. You're the wolfless one, he said. You're the one standing uninvited in my doorway, she replied, in the rain, at midnight. The corner of his mouth twitched. He stepped inside without waiting, ducking his head to clear the frame, and the cabin shrank around him. The fire seemed to lean toward him. The shadows rearranged themselves. I need an heir, Declan Blackmore said. There was no ceremony in it, no courtly preamble. My council has given me until year's end. Every she-wolf of noble blood in 5 territories has been paraded before me. 38 of them. I've refused them all. He paused. In the firelight, his scars stood out. Claw marks across his ribs, a rope of tissue across his shoulder, a faded bite mark at his throat. My scouts brought me word of a woman living alone in Thornridge, a survivor, strong enough to endure 94 days of exile, unattached to any pack or political alliance. Isla stared at him. The fire crackled. Rain pounded the roof. The necklace grew hot against her throat. Let me give you sons, woman, Declan said, and Isla's breath caught. Not because of the audacity, though there was that, but because of what lived beneath the words. His voice was steady, his posture commanding, but his eyes held something she recognized with bone-deep certainty. Desperation. You don't want me, Isla said quietly. I have no wolf. I am nothing in your world. You are alive in Thornridge, 94 days. That is not nothing. He glanced around the cabin, taking in the patched roof, the tin cup leak catcher, the snare wire. That is remarkable. Isla squared her shoulders. The fang thrummed with gathering power beneath her palm. I don't know you, she said. No, Declan agreed. You don't. He lowered himself onto the only stool which creaked dangerously and rested his forearms on his knees. In the firelight, the scars on his hands looked like a map of old wars. But I am asking, he said, not commanding. Asking. Come to Stonehaven Fortress. I will give you quarters, protection, food safety. In exchange, you bear me an heir, not as Luna. My court would never accept a wolfless woman beside the throne. You would be my consort, honored, protected, but not my queen. He met her eyes in the firelight caught in his irises like honey held to sun. I am offering you survival, not love. Isla almost laughed. Love, as if she had ever been offered that. Why me, she asked. Why not one of the 38 noble she-wolves? Because they want the crown, not the man. They see power. I need someone who sees survival. Someone who understands what it costs to keep breathing when the world tells you to stop. He stood. I will return in 3 days for your answer. If you choose to come, I will treat you as my partner in all things but title. You will attend my councils. Your voice will carry my authority. You will want for nothing. He paused at the door. If you choose to stay, I will leave supplies. Either way, you will survive. He ducked through the doorframe and into the rain. Within seconds, the darkness had swallowed him. Isla stood in the doorway, rain misting her face, staring at where he had disappeared. Her mind was spinning. Her chest felt too full. Partner. Not love, but survival, a choice freely offered. She touched the pendant, feeling its ancient heartbeat against her skin. The fang had cooled, but still pulsed with faint golden light. She closed the door and sat before the dying fire, thinking about what it meant to be offered a choice when you had spent your entire life being told you had none. 3 days later, when Declan returned, Isla was waiting. She had wrapped her feet for the journey. She had fashioned a crude pack from woven grass and filled it with the clay, pot snare wire dried mushrooms. He knocked 3 times and she opened the door with the pack on her shoulder. He looked at the pack, then at her face. Something passed through his expression. Surprise or respect. You've decided, he said. I've decided that freezing to death in a collapsing cabin is not the legacy I want. She stepped past him into the gray morning light. Don't mistake practicality for submission. I wouldn't dare, Declan said, and the corner of his mouth curved. They began to walk. The journey to Stonehaven took 9 days on foot. Declan could have shifted. His wolf was a beast of terrifying proportions, black-furred and amber-eyed, tall enough at the shoulder to look a horse in the face, but he walked beside her in human form, matching her pace without comment. They spoke little during the first 2 days. The silence was watchful, 2 cautious creatures circling each other. Isla observed, the way he moved through the forest with absolute confidence. The way his head turned fractionally towards sounds she could barely hear. The way he positioned himself between her and the wind when they made camp. On the second evening, the temperature plummeted. They had climbed higher into the Rockies, and the altitude brought cold that cut through Isla's torn dress like knives. She had wrapped herself in the grass pack and curled close to their fire, but it was not enough. By midnight, her teeth were chattering. She woke to warmth. Declan's leather cloak was draped over her, heavy and lined with fur that held his body heat. The scent of him enveloped her. She sat up, clutching the cloak, and found him sitting against a tree 15 feet away, arms crossed over her bare chest, watching the tree line. You'll freeze, Isla said. I don't, Declan replied. His breath formed clouds, but his body showed no distress. Sleep. We have a long walk tomorrow. I can't take your cloak if you need it. I don't need it, you do. That's the end of the discussion. Isla wanted to argue, but the cold was sinking into her bones, and the cloak was warm, and she was so tired of fighting battles, she could not win. She pulled the cloak tighter and lay back down. Sleep came quickly, and when she woke at dawn, Declan was still sitting against the tree, still watching, and frost had formed in his black hair like a crown of ice. Something shifted in her chest, a crack in the wall she had built around trust. On the 3rd day, they talked. They had stopped beside a frozen creek, and Isla was refilling her clay pot when Declan spoke. Your scouts, Isla said. The ones who found me. How long had they been watching? The rasp of steel on stone as he sharpened his knife. Then from the first day of your exile, all 94 days. Isla's hands stilled. She turned to face him. You let me starve to test me. I left the rabbits and the tarps, and I cleared the paths. I did not let you starve. I let you adapt. You could have come sooner. Yes, but I needed to know if you were real. Anyone can survive a week with supplies. Surviving 94 days alone without a wolf in feral territory. That's not survival, that's will. I needed to see if the will was genuine or stubbornness waiting to collapse. Isla absorbed that. 94 days of invisible observation. She should have been furious. Instead, she asked, and your conclusion? My conclusion is that you may be the most dangerous person I've ever met. The words hung between them. Dangerous. Her. The wolfless girl who had been invisible for so long. She pulled his cloak tighter. It had become hers over the past 2 nights, passed between them without discussion. She could smell him on the leather now. "Tell me about Stonehaven," she said. "What should I expect?" His expression hardened. "Politics. My court is divided between those who support my reforms and those loyal to my mother, Lady Seraphine Blackmore. She ruled beside my father for 40 years, enforced his cruelties, broke wolves who questioned him from the inside out until they were hollow. Why didn't you exile her when you took the throne? Because she's my mother, and because half the court is still loyal to her. Exiling her would have fractured the kingdom. I've spent 5 years trying to dismantle my father's legacy without shattering everything he built." He stood and began gathering their supplies. "My father was not a good man. He ruled through fear, public executions, breaking wolves who questioned his authority. When I was 23, he executed a 12-year-old boy for stealing bread from the kitchens, hung him in the square for everyone to see." Isla's stomach turned. For bread, for defiance. The boy's crime was making my father look weak. His hand stilled. I challenged him that night. Ritual combat in front of 500 witnesses. I killed him with my bare hands, and my mother stood at the edge of the circle and said nothing, because she had orchestrated the whole thing. A son she could influence was better than a mate she couldn't control. He turned to face her. "I carry the weight of 127 wolves my father broke before I stopped him. Every night I see their faces. Every decision I make, I wonder if I'm strong enough to be different or if I'm just him with better intentions." The confession hung between them, raw and bleeding. Isla crossed the distance between them. She did not think about it. She simply reached up and placed her palm flat against his chest over his heart. The beat was strong and steady beneath her fingers. "You're not him," she said. "If you were, you wouldn't question it." He stared down at her hand and his carefully maintained control fractured. He raised his own hand as if to cover hers, then stopped, fingers hovering. "How can you be sure, Pun? Because you asked my permission to court me. Because you offered me a choice. Because you're standing here telling me about your fears instead of pretending you don't have them. Your father would never have done any of those things." His hand finally settled over hers, warm and calloused, and so large it swallowed her fingers completely. They stood like that for a long moment, her palm against his heartbeat and his hand covering hers. Then Declan stepped back, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. "We should keep moving. We're only halfway there." But something had changed. The careful distance had narrowed, and when they walked, their shoulders occasionally brushed, and neither pulled away. On the 5th day, Isla asked about the scars. They were resting in a shallow cave, waiting out an afternoon storm. Declan had removed his shirt to clean a shallow cut on his ribs, and Isla found herself staring at the map of violence written across his skin. Claw marks raked across his abdomen, 4 parallel lines healed white and puckered. A puncture wound below his left shoulder blade. Burns on his forearms, deliberate and uniform, and the thick rope of scar tissue across his throat. "The claw marks," Isla said, "those are from a challenge." He glanced down as if surprised to find himself scarred. "My father. When I was 16, I questioned an execution order, and he shifted and came at me in front of the whole court. I hadn't learned to shift yet. He wanted to teach me a lesson about respecting authority." The burns. "Also my father. When I was 19 and tried to implement a food distribution program for Omegas. He said I was making the pack soft. Held my arms over the forge fires until I recanted. I never implemented the program while he lived." Isla's hands had curled into fists. "And the throat? That one I earned, and the challenge that killed him. He went for my throat, tried to rip it out. Almost succeeded. I got my hand in his jaws and broke his neck before he could finish the job." He touched the scar absently. "Sometimes I think about what it cost. Not killing him. I do that again without hesitation. But what it cost the pack. The wolves who still revere him. The ones who see me as a patricide. The children who grew up worshiping the Alpha King and now have to reconcile that worship with the truth." "You freed them," Isla said. "I traumatized them. There's a difference." He pulled his shirt back on. "My mother made sure of that. She turned my father's death into a tragedy. The noble king struck down by his ambitious son. She's been undermining me for 5 years, subtle and patient." "Why doesn't she challenge you herself?" "Because she'd lose. She's powerful, but I'm stronger. So she works through proxies, whispers to the council, poisons the court against anyone I show favor to. When I bring you to Stonehaven, she will try to destroy you. Not because she hates you personally, because you represent a threat to her control." "I have no wolf," Isla said. "How could I possibly threaten her?" "You threaten her because I chose you, because you're not part of her network. Because you survived something that should have killed you, and that kind of strength is dangerous to people who rely on others being weak. The rain hammered the rocks. Lightning flashed. I can protect you from physical threats, but the court is a different battlefield. You'll need to be smart, careful, trust no one until they've proven themselves. I've been doing that my whole life, Isla replied. I think I can manage a few more hostile nobles. He studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a real laugh, genuine and almost boyish, and it transformed his face completely. You're going to be magnificent, he said, still smiling, and they're going to hate you for it. Isla found herself smiling back. Good. They reached Stonehaven on the 9th day as the sun was setting behind the western peaks. The fortress rose from the mountains like a clenched fist of black stone. Towers and battlements carved from native rock reinforced with timber and iron. The outer walls were 60 feet high. The gates were iron-bound oak, 20 feet tall, and they groaned open at Declan's approach, as if the fortress itself recognized its master. Isla stopped walking. The sheer scale stole the breath from her lungs. This was not a pack house. This was a kingdom made solid. Impressive, isn't it? Declan said. My great-grandfather built it 200 years ago, carved it out of the mountain with 5,000 workers and a lot of blood. It's terrifying. Yes, that's rather the point. They passed through the gates into a courtyard large enough to hold 300 people, and there were easily that many present. Courtiers in dark furs and polished leather. Warriors with scarred faces and yellow eyes that tracked her with suspicion. Servants in plain wool heads bowed. And at the head of the assembled crowd, standing on a raised stone platform, a woman who could only be Lady Seraphine Blackmore. She was perhaps 55, though it was hard to tell with shifters. Silver hair pulled back in a severe braid. Ice blue eyes that missed nothing. She wore black silk embroidered with silver thread and a collar of wolf fangs. Her posture radiated authority like heat from a forge. The crowd parted as Declan walked forward, Isla half a step behind. She could feel their combined presence pressing against her chest. She lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness. This, Seraphine said, her voice cutting through the murmur like a blade, is the wolfless girl. Not a question, an accusation. This is Isla of Ashwood. Declan replied, his voice carrying authority with an edge of warning. She is under my protection. She has my respect. And she will be treated with the courtesy due to my consort. Seraphine descended the platform steps with fluid grace. She circled Isla slowly, openly examining her like livestock at market. Isla forced herself to stand still to meet those ice-blue eyes without flinching. She has no wolf, Seraphine observed. No bloodline of note, no political value, no skills that I can see. What exactly does she have, my son? The fang thrummed with gathering power beneath Isla's collarbone. She could feel something building in her chest, like her body contained something too large to be held inside skin and bone. Lungs, Isla said quietly before Declan could respond. And the good sense to use them when spoken about, as though I'm not standing right here. A ripple of shock moved through the court. Several wolves took a step back. Seraphine's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then Declan laughed, brief, barely more than an exhaled breath, but unmistakable. The corner of his mouth curved. Seraphine's gaze flicked to her son, then back to Isla. You have spirit. We shall see how long it lasts. She turned and swept toward the main keep, the crowd parting. Half the courtiers followed her expressions, ranging from curious to hostile. The other half remained clustering around Declan, calculation in their eyes as they reassessed her. Declan's hand came to rest on the small of Isla's back, just briefly grounding her, and then he was leading her through the courtyard toward the fortress entrance. That went well, he murmured. You have a strange definition of well. You're alive, you stood up to her. And you made half the court wonder if I've brought home someone far more dangerous than they assumed. That's better than I hoped for. They entered Stonehaven, tapestries depicting ancient battles, sconces holding torches casting shadows across stone walls carved with wolves and moons, hallways wide enough for 4 people to walk abreast. Everything screamed wealth and power and permanence. Declan led her through corridors to the east wing. They climbed a spiral staircase carved from the mountain itself, ascending what felt like 100 feet until they reached a heavy wooden door bound with iron. Your quarters, Declan said, pushing it open. The room was larger than the entire cabin, a 4-poster bed with heavy curtains, a stone fireplace already laid with wood, a writing desk, a wardrobe, windows overlooking the mountains with glass panes that kept out the cold. This is mine, Isla asked, wonder in her voice. Yes. Declan crossed to the fireplace and lit the kindling with practiced efficiency. Flames caught and spread, filling the room with warmth and golden light. The east tower is isolated from the main keep. That's intentional. It keeps you separated from court politics, but also makes you an easy target for anyone who wants to cause trouble. Comforting. I'll post guards. Wolves, I trust. He straightened from the fire and faced her. and I'll be 3 floors directly below you. If you need anything, day or night, pull that cord." He pointed to a braided rope beside the bed. "It rings a bell in my chamber." Isla nodded, trying to absorb everything. The room, the fortress, the fact that she was here surrounded by wolves who ranged from suspicious to hostile. Declan must have seen something in her expression because his own softened. "You survived 94 days in Thornridge. You can survive this." Thornridge was simpler. The threats there tried to eat me. Here they'll smile while they poison my food. Yes, that's why you'll eat nothing that hasn't been tasted by someone you trust first. He pulled a small leather pouch from his belt and handed it to her. "Wolfsbane detector. Crush one of these leaves into any food or drink before you consume it. If it turns black, don't eat it." Isla took the pouch and their fingers brushed. The contact sent a current through her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Declan held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped back, putting distance between them with obvious effort. "Rest. I'll send servants with food and clothing. Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to the people you can trust." He was at the door when Isla spoke again. "Declan?" He turned. "Why are you really doing this?" "The truth." He was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. "Then, because I was drowning. 5 years as king. 5 years of my mother's politics of councils that want nothing but power of she-wolves presented to me like prizes. I am surrounded by hundreds of wolves, and I have not had a single honest conversation in longer than I can remember." His eyes were molten in the firelight. "My scouts told me about a woman surviving alone in Thornridge. No wolf, no pack, no protection. And I thought if she can endure that, maybe she can endure me." Isla's throat tightened. "That's a low bar for courtship. I never said I was good at this." A ghost of a smile. "But I meant what I said. I need someone who sees me, Isla. The real parts. The broken parts. Not the crown, not the power. Just the man who's trying very hard not to become his father and isn't sure he's succeeding." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly, and Isla stood in the center of her new quarters with tears burning behind her eyes. For the first time since her mother died, someone saw her, really saw her. Not the wolfless failure or the exile. Just Isla with all her scars and survival skills and stubborn refusal to disappear. She touched the pendant, feeling its ancient heartbeat against her skin. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new threats, a court full of wolves who wanted her gone. But tonight she had warmth and safety and something that might eventually become trust. It was more than she had dared hope for in a very long time. The servants arrived an hour later. 2 women, both Omegas, both careful not to meet Isla's eyes. They brought food on silver trays, roasted venison, fresh bread, honeyed carrots, berries and cream, and Isla's stomach cramped with hunger. But she remembered Declan's warning. She crushed a leaf from the pouch into each dish, watching carefully. Everything turned faintly green. Safe. The servants watched with expressions ranging from curious to pitying, but said nothing. They also brought clothing simple but well-made. After they left, Isla ate slowly, savoring each bite. Real food, not rabbit torn apart with her fingers or bitter dandelion greens. Meat that melted on her tongue. She was halfway through the meal when someone knocked. Isla froze. It was full dark now, well past any reasonable hour for visitors. She reached for the knife tucked into her boot and approached the door. "Who is it?" "Someone who wants you gone," said a young female voice. "But not dead. May I come in?" Isla opened the door a crack. A girl stood in the hallway, perhaps 16 or 17, with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much. She was small, wearing a servant's plain wool, and her hands were twisted together nervously. But what caught Isla's attention was the way the girl held herself. Tense, frightened, and completely mute. When she tried to speak again, her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The girl held up a piece of charcoal and a scrap of parchment. She wrote quickly, then held it up. "My name is Raven. I cannot speak. Lady Seraphine cut out my tongue when I was 12 because my mother spoke against the old king. I am not your enemy, but others are. Trust no food from servants you don't know. Lady Seraphine has spies everywhere." Isla read the note twice. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." Raven entered quickly, glancing down the hallway before Isla closed the door. She crossed to the writing desk and scribbled another note. "The king freed me from the dungeons 5 years ago when he took the throne. He gave me safe work in the kitchens. I owe him my life. That's why I'm warning you. His mother will try to kill you. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, when she thinks no one is watching." "Why are you telling me this?" Isla asked. Raven's hand moved across the parchment. "Because you looked at me. In the courtyard. Everyone else looks through me. You saw me. That hasn't happened in 10 years. Something in Isla's chest cracked. She knew exactly what Raven meant. The invisibility of being dismissed, overlooked, erased. She crossed to Raven and, very slowly giving the girl time to pull away, placed her hand over Raven's scarred fingers. Thank you for the warning, for trusting me. Raven's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed Isla's hand once hard, then pulled back and wrote another note. I will bring your food personally from now on. And I will teach you who to trust. There are some in this fortress who hate what Seraphine has done, but they are afraid to speak against her. Will you speak against her? Raven's smile was sharp and bitter. She wrote, I already have. Why do you think I have no tongue? She left as quietly as she had come, and Isla stood in the center of the room with a scrap of parchment clutched in her hand and the first real ally she had found in Stonehaven. The days that followed established a rhythm of luxury and danger. Isla woke each morning to Raven bringing breakfast. They developed a system of communication, Raven writing notes and Isla reading them aloud. Through this, Isla learned the geography of the court, who hated Declan, who feared Seraphine, who might be swayed to support a wolfless consort. On the third day, Captain Gareth appeared at her door. He was a mountain of a man, perhaps 40, with a face that looked rebuilt several times after being broken in combat. Scars crisscrossed his jaw and neck. One ear was partially missing, but his eyes were sharp and assessing, and when he looked at Isla, she saw none of the contempt she had grown accustomed to. The king says you survived Thornridge with no training, Gareth said without preamble. I don't believe him. Show me your hands. Isla held them out, calloused palms, scarred knuckles, nails broken and ragged. Gareth grunted. You've worked. Good. Can you fight? I can survive. Different skill. He jerked his head toward the hallway. Training yard. Now, if someone tries to poison you again, you should be able to gut them before you die. Thus began Isla's education in combat. Every afternoon, Gareth drilled her in knife work, hand-to-hand techniques, wolf pack dynamics. He was brutal and efficient, pulling no punches. When she made mistakes, he corrected them with sharp words and sharper demonstrations. When she succeeded, he gave curt nods that felt like the highest praise. The warriors who trained in the yard watched with open curiosity at first. But when Isla held her own against Gareth for 30 full seconds, during a sparring match, blocking and countering, with techniques she had learned by sheer repetition, the murmurs shifted from mocking to something approaching respect. You're a quick study, Gareth said after she successfully disarmed him, using a move he had shown her only twice. Most wolves rely on strength. You're learning to use leverage. That's smart. I've never had strength, Isla replied, breathing hard. I've had to be smart. Gareth's scarred face split into something that might have been a smile. Keep that attitude. It'll keep you alive longer than muscle. On the fifth day, an elderly woman appeared in Isla's quarters without knocking. She was perhaps 65, with graying hair pulled into a practical bun and hands calloused from decades of work. She wore the simple robes of a healer, and her eyes were the pale blue of winter sky. There was something familiar about her, and it took Isla a moment to place it. The woman from the exile ceremony, the one who had seen the necklace glow. My name is Thessaly, the woman said, setting down a tea service with practiced efficiency. I am the head healer of Stonehaven, and I knew your mother. Isla went very still. You knew Elena. I did. We trained together in the coastal packs when we were young. She was the finest healer I ever met, and she carried something inside her that frightened the pack elders so badly they pressured her to leave. What did she carry? The same thing you carry. Thessaly's pale eyes fixed on the necklace. May I see that? Isla's hand went protectively to her throat. It was my mother's. I know. I was there when her grandmother gave it to her. Please, I think I can help you understand what's happening to you. Slowly, Isla lifted the necklace over her head and placed it in Thessaly's outstretched palm. The moment it left contact with her skin, she felt a strange emptiness. Thessaly examined the fang in the firelight. This is very old, older than the Northern Territories, older than the pack system itself. She turned it slowly and Isla saw symbols carved into the surface so small and faded they were almost invisible. Your mother's line has carried this for generations. It's a conduit. A conduit for what? Thessaly met her eyes. For something the old texts call lunarisma, the moon soul. It's not a wolf, it's older than wolves. A direct connection to the source of our power, to the moon goddess herself. Isla's pulse quickened. That's impossible. If I had something like that, I would have a wolf. I would have shifted. No. Thessaly handed the necklace back, and the moment Isla touched it, golden light sparked beneath her ribs. Lunarisma doesn't manifest as a wolf. It manifests as something else. Command, healing, the ability to see into the souls of other wolves and show them truth they cannot deny. She gestured to the tea. Drink, and I'll tell you what your mother never had the chance to explain. They talked for hours. Thessaly explained that lunarisma bearers appeared perhaps once every few centuries. They were always female, always wolfless, because the power they carried was too large to share space with a wolf spirit. and always hunted because wolves in power feared anyone who could command them without violence, who could heal what others broke, who could expose lies simply by being present. Your mother suppressed hers. She felt it waking when she was your age, and the elders told her it was dark magic. They threatened to kill her if she didn't contain it, so she pushed it down deeper and deeper until it went dormant. And it killed her Isla. Suppressing that much power for that long, it ate her alive from the inside. Isla's hands were shaking. She died to protect me. She died because she was afraid of what the pack would do to you if they knew what you carried. But now you're here, away from Ashwood, and the Lunarisma is waking. I saw it glow during your exile, and I'm betting you've noticed strange things happening. Animals responding to you. Wolves submitting when you speak with authority. A sense of other living things like you can feel their presence. Yes, Isla whispered. All of that. That's it waking, and when it fully manifests, you'll be able to do things that will terrify everyone in this fortress. Seraphine will try to kill you before that happens. She fears anything she cannot control. You need to be ready. How do I control it? You don't. Not yet. But I can teach you. Thessaly stood. Meet me in the gardens tomorrow at dawn, and tell no one, not even the king, not until we know what you're capable of. She left, and Isla sat alone with her tea and her racing thoughts and the necklace burning against her palm. Lunarisma, the moon soul, something her mother had carried and died trying to suppress. Something Isla had inherited without understanding. Something that was waking inside her, whether she was ready or not. That night, Declan came to her quarters. He knocked softly, and when Isla opened the door, she found him standing in the hallway with his hair damp from bathing and exhaustion written across his face. I shouldn't be here, he said. It's not appropriate for me to visit your quarters at night, but I needed to see that you were all right. I'm fine, Isla said, and it was mostly true. Gareth is teaching me to fight. Raven is teaching me court politics. Thessaly is teaching me other things. Declan's gaze locked on her wolf rising to the surface. Thessaly came to you. Yes, she knew my mother. Thessaly is the wisest person in this fortress. If she's taken an interest in you, listen to everything she says. He paused. My mother hosted a dinner tonight. Half the court attended. They spent 2 hours discussing how unsuitable you are as my consort. And the other half weren't invited. That's how she works. Divides the court into those who agree with her and those who are excluded. The excluded wolves feel the pressure, and eventually they cave. He leaned against the doorframe, and the firelight caught the shadows under his eyes. I'm sorry, I knew it would be difficult, but I underestimated how bold she would be. Isla reached out and took his hand. The gesture felt natural now after 9 days of traveling together. His fingers closed around hers automatically. We stand together, she said quietly. Remember, you're not in this alone. Declan stared at their joined hands. Then he did something that surprised her. He raised her hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so tender and courtly it made her breath catch. Partners, he said against her skin, in all things. He left before she could respond, but the warmth of his lips lingered on her hand long after the door closed. Isla touched her fingers to her mouth, trying to understand the flutter in her chest. This was not part of the arrangement. This growing awareness of him. This pull that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the way he looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous at once. She was falling, she realized. Not in love, not yet, but into something that might become love if given time and space and honesty. The thought terrified her almost as much as Seraphine did. Almost. The poisoning came 3 weeks after Isla arrived at Stonehaven. She had fallen into the rhythm of fortress life. Mornings with Thessaly in the gardens, learning to sense the lunarisma that pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Afternoons with Gareth in the training yard, her body growing stronger and more capable. Evenings in the library, reading texts about pack law and Northern Territories history. And nights. Nights were for Declan. He came to her quarters almost every evening now, always knocking, always asking permission. They talked about everything and nothing. His fears about being king. Her memories of Elena. The weight of their respective isolations. He told her about the 127 wolves his father had broken, reciting their names like a prayer. She told her about the years of invisibility, about what it felt like to be erased by people who should have loved her. They sat by her fire, never touching beyond the occasional brush of hands, and built something fragile between them. Trust, maybe, or the foundation of something that might eventually become more. On the morning of the poisoning, Isla woke to Raven delivering breakfast as usual. Bread, honey, soft cheese, sliced apples. Simple fare, but more than Isla had eaten in years. She crushed a wolfsbane detector leaf into each dish, watching carefully. The bread turned black. Isla stared at the darkened leaf, her pulse kicking into a higher gear. Someone had poisoned her food. Someone with access to the kitchens. Someone who knew Raven's routine. Someone bold enough to try murder in broad daylight. Raven saw the black leaf and went pale. She grabbed parchment and scribbled frantically. I prepared this myself. I watched it the whole time. I don't understand. It's not your fault, Isla said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Someone got to it between the kitchen and here. We need to tell Declan. But before Raven could leave, Isla's vision blurred. The room tilted sideways. Her legs gave out, and she caught herself on the edge of the table, fingers scrabbling for purchase. I didn't eat it, she tried to say, but the words came out slurred. The bread. She had touched it when checking the wolfsbane detector. Just a brush of her fingers against the surface, but wolfsbane could be absorbed through skin if the concentration was high enough. The floor rushed up to meet her. Isla woke to pain, fire in her veins, her body convulsing. Someone was screaming high and desperate, and it took her a moment to realize the sound was coming from her own throat. Hands held her down. Raven's face swam above her mouth open in a silent scream. Then the door exploded inward, wood splintering, and a massive black wolf filled the doorway. Declan, he was enormous in wolf form, easily 7 feet at the shoulder, with fur so black it seemed to absorb light. His eyes blazed with fury, and when he shifted back to human form, the transformation was so fast it looked like reality tearing itself apart. What happened? His voice was barely human, caught between man and beast. Raven thrust the parchment at him, the one explaining about the poison, and Declan's face went from fury to something colder and far more dangerous. He scooped Isla into his arms like she weighed nothing and ran. The journey to the healer's chamber was a blur of corridors and shouted orders. Isla's body was shutting down organs, failing one by one, as the wolfsbane worked through her system. Her heart stuttered. Her lungs burned. The world faded in and out like a candle flame in wind. Thessaly was waiting when they arrived. She had clearly been summoned ahead, her workspace already prepared with herbs and instruments and a bowl of water that steamed in the cold air. Wolfsbane, Thessaly said, examining Isla's pupils. High concentration. She's human, so she might survive, but she needs wolf healing energy to burn it out of her system. Take mine, Declan said immediately. It's dangerous. The blood bond ritual requires, I know what it requires, do it. Thessaly worked quickly. She cut Declan's palm with a silver blade, then Isla's, and pressed their hands together. Blood mingled, and Declan began to chant in a language so old Isla had never heard it spoken aloud. For a moment, nothing happened. Then golden light erupted from their joined hands. Not from Declan, from Isla. The light was blinding, pure and warm and impossibly bright. It poured from her skin like liquid sunlight flooding the chamber, and where it touched the wolfsbane in her veins, the poison simply ceased to exist. Burned away in seconds, leaving no trace. The convulsions stopped. Her heartbeat steadied, her lungs filled with air that didn't burn, and Declan staggered backwards, staring at their hands with an expression caught between awe and terror. What are you? He whispered. Thessaly answered before Isla could find words. Lunarisma, the moon soul. It hasn't manifested in 427 years. Declan's gaze locked on the old healer wolf rising to the surface. You knew, I suspected. Her mother Elena carried it, suppressed it her whole life. The blood bond triggered the awakening. The Lunarisma recognized wolf energy and responded. It saved her life, but it also revealed what she is. And what exactly is she? Declan's voice was carefully controlled, but Isla could hear the edge beneath it. Dangerous. To anyone who relies on wolves being controllable. The Lunarisma is older than pack hierarchy, older than alphas and omegas. It's a direct channel to the source of our power, and anyone who carries it can command, heal, or shatter any wolf within range. Isla sat up slowly, her head still spinning. She looked at her hands and they were glowing faintly golden light, visible beneath the skin, like she had swallowed the sun. I don't understand, she said. I've never had a wolf. How can I command them? Because you don't need a wolf. The Lunarisma shows wolves what's real. Their instincts, their deepest nature. When you speak with it active, they hear truth they cannot deny. And truth is more powerful than any alpha command. Declan crossed to Isla and dropped to his knees beside the cot where she lay. His hands shook as he reached for her face, cupping her cheeks with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone his size. The poisoning was my mother, he said, and his voice was wrecked. I know it was. She's eliminated threats before. 6 rivals over 40 years. I have proof, but no witnesses willing to testify. Then we find witnesses, Isla said. There are none. She's too careful, too patient. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I will not let her touch you again. I swear it. Isla placed her hands over his, anchoring him. Then we protect each other. You said it yourself. Partners. Something shifted in Declan's expression. The careful control cracked, and beneath it she saw raw need, desperate and barely contained. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. I cannot lose you, he said against her skin. I know we made an arrangement. I know this was supposed to be practical. But I cannot lose you, Isla. Her heart stuttered, and this time it had nothing to do with poison. You won't. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync, while Thessaly quietly left the chamber and closed the door behind her. The golden light beneath Isla's skin pulsed once warm and bright and settled into a steady glow that matched the rhythm of Declan's heartbeat. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of building alliances and avoiding assassination. Isla's eyes had changed permanently after the blood bond. The brown was still there, but shot through now with threads of pale gold that caught the light and made her look otherworldly. She could no longer hide what she was, so she stopped trying. Instead, she leaned into it. Thessaly taught her to control the lunarisma in the gardens each dawn, showing her how to channel it in targeted pulses rather than explosive bursts. Isla learned to sense wolves at a distance, to feel their emotional states like music on the air. Fear felt sharp and discordant. Loyalty felt warm and steady. Deception felt slippery, like trying to hold water. Gareth's combat training intensified. He brought in other warriors wolves loyal to Declan, and they sparred with Isla without holding back. She collected bruises like medals and learned to use her size as an advantage, slipping inside larger opponents' guards and striking at vulnerable points with vicious efficiency. And Raven became her eyes and ears in the places Isla could not go. The mute girl moved through the fortress like a ghost, overlooked and underestimated, and she reported everything. Which courtiers met with Seraphine in secret, which servants were on her payroll, which warriors wavered in their loyalty to Declan. On the 35th day after Isla's arrival, Declan invited her to attend her first war council. The chamber was circular, carved from black stone, with a massive table in the center, displaying a detailed map of the Northern Territories. 12 wolves were present when Isla entered, all male except for one scarred female warrior. They fell silent as she took the seat Declan indicated directly at his right hand. The message was clear. This wolfless woman held the king's favor. Gentlemen, Declan said, his voice carrying absolute authority. This is Isla of Ashwood, my consort. She shares my authority in all matters of state. Treat her accordingly. A murmur ran through the council, not all approving. Lord Hadrian, a silver-haired alpha with cold eyes, spoke first. With respect, Your Majesty, the council has not approved a wolfless consort. This violates tradition. Tradition is what we make it. Unless you wish to challenge my authority to choose my own partner. Hadrian went pale. Challenging an alpha king was ritual combat to the death. No, Your Majesty. Good. Then we move on. Declan gestured to the map. Our western border with the Ashwood territory has been unstable. Alpha Kael Thorn has increased patrols and made territorial claims on disputed land. Captain Gareth report. The discussion turned to military matters, and Isla listened carefully. Troop movements, supply lines, weak points in their defenses. She had studied maps in the library, memorizing the terrain, and now she saw how that knowledge fit into the larger strategic picture. Halfway through the meeting, Lord Hadrian raised an issue about a trade route that passed through mountainous terrain prone to avalanches in winter. We lose 3 shipments every year to snowslides, he said. The route is dangerous and unreliable. Isla spoke before she could second-guess herself. There's an alternate route through the eastern valleys. It adds 12 miles, but the terrain is stable year-round. Lower altitude means less snow accumulation. Every eye in the room turned to her. And you know this how? Hadrian asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. I mapped the territory for 6 years before my exile. I knew I would need to escape eventually, and I wanted to know every path, every creek, every ridge within a 100-mile radius. I can draw you the route if you'd like. Silence. Then Declan pushed parchment and charcoal across the table. Show us. Isla sketched quickly, her hands steady despite the weight of 12 wolves watching her every move. She drew the valleys, marked the creek crossings, indicated the elevation changes. When she finished, she slid the parchment back to Declan. He studied it, then passed it to Gareth. The warrior's scarred face showed surprise, then grudging respect. This could work, Gareth said. It's longer, but we could move shipments year-round instead of losing 3 months to weather. The trade-off is worth it. Implement it, Declan ordered. Then he looked at Isla, and the pride blazing in his expression made her chest tighten. Well done. Lord Hadrian's expression was sour, but he said nothing. The meeting continued, and Isla contributed twice more small observations based on her knowledge of terrain and weather patterns. By the end, even the skeptical counselors were listening when she spoke. After they adjourned, Declan walked her back to her quarters. His hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture that had become natural between them. You were magnificent, he said quietly. You made them see you as valuable, not just tolerated. They still don't trust me. No, but they respect you. That's more important. He stopped outside her door, and his expression grew serious. Isla, there's something I need to ask you. Her pulse quickened. What? The Moonfire ceremony is in 4 days. It's an ancient rite where the entire pack shifts simultaneously and howls to honor the season. 200 wolves all shifting at once. You're not expected to participate, but I want you there. I want them to see you standing with me, even though I can't shift, especially because you can't shift. You survived 94 days in Thornridge. You faced down my counsel. You're not lesser because you lack a wolf. You're extraordinary because you've accomplished everything without one. Isla leaned into his touch. Over the past weeks, they had grown closer through countless small intimacies. The way he steadied her when she stumbled during training, the way she found his hand automatically when they walked, the night he had fallen asleep in the chair by her fire exhausted, and she had covered him with a blanket and let him rest. They had not kissed, had not crossed that final boundary, but the air between them was charged with possibility. I'll be there, she said. Declan's thumb traced her lower lip and his eyes darkened. May I kiss you? The question hung between them, heavy with promise. I thought you'd never ask, Isla whispered. He kissed her like a man who had been starving and finally found sustenance. Gentle at first, almost tentative, giving her space to pull away. But when she made a soft sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, his control shattered. His hands slid into her hair. Her fingers clutched at his shoulders. The kiss deepened, desperate, in hungry months of careful distance, burning away in the heat between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Declan pressed his forehead to hers. As equals in everything, he said raggedly. Neither of us bows to the other. Then lead me to bed, Isla said, and her voice was steady despite the way her heart hammered. I choose you, Declan, not survival. You. He swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold, kicking the door closed behind them. What happened next was tender and fierce and entirely theirs. Two broken people finding wholeness in each other, two survivors claiming something beautiful after years of pain. The wolf fang necklace glowed golden through the night, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere deep in Isla's chest, the Lunarisma pulsed in time with their joined heartbeats. The Moonfire ceremony took place in the Great Hall 4 days later. The hall was packed with wolves, 200 strong, all waiting for the Moonfire ceremony. Courtiers, warriors, servants, everyone who served Stonehaven. They stood in concentric circles around the center where Declan would lead the shift. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering light across stone carved with ancient symbols. Ayla stood at the edge near a pillar, Raven beside her. She wore a dress Declan had commissioned, deep green silk that brought out the gold in her eyes. The fang lay cool and waiting against her collarbone. Thessaly had warned her this morning. The Lunarisma will react to mass wolf energy. When 200 wolves shift simultaneously, the power in this room will be immense. Your gift will respond. Be prepared. Now watching Declan stripped to the waist in the center of the hall, Isla felt the first stirrings of power in her chest. The Lunarisma recognized wolf energy like calling to like, and it was waking. Declan's body bore the map of his survival. Every scar a testament to battles fought and won, to the father he'd killed to save his pack, to the weight he carried every day. But he stood proud, shoulders back, and when he met Isla's eyes across the hall, she saw love there, raw and honest and terrifying in its intensity. The howl began, one voice Declan's deep and resonant, then 10 voices joined. Then 50. Then all 200 wolves raised their voices in a harmonic wave that shook the torches in their sconces and made the very stones vibrate. The mass shift started. Bones cracked in a symphony of breaking and reforming. Fur erupted across skin. Human forms dropped to all fours as wolves emerged, a forest of them filling the great hall. Gray and black and brown and silver eyes glowing in the torchlight, powerful and primal and beautiful. The sound hit Isla like a physical blow. The Lunarisma detonated. She staggered, grabbing the pillar for balance, and felt something inside her chest tear open. Not painful, but vast, like her body was suddenly a doorway for something too large to be contained. The presence she had felt stirring for months surged upward with crushing force. Her bones sang, her skin burned. The wolf fang necklace blazed with golden light, so bright it turned the hall into midday. She did not shift. There was no wolf to call. But the power that erupted from her was something the assembled pack had never witnessed. A pulse. Golden, visible, rippling outward from her body in a shockwave that swept through the great hall like a wave of pure authority. Every wolf it touched staggered. Some whimpered. Some dropped to their bellies in immediate instinctive submission. The weaker wolves collapsed entirely, unable to withstand the weight of what they felt. Silence descended like a hammer blow. 200 wolves stared at the wolfless woman standing by the pillar, her eyes blazing solid gold, her body trembling, her hands gripping the stone hard enough that cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. Declan's enormous black wolf stood in the center of the hall. He had not dropped, had not flinched. But his eyes were fixed on Isla with an expression that no wolf should have been capable of. Recognition, understanding, and something that looked impossibly like reverence. Then Seraphine's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Abomination. The silver-haired woman stood at the edge of the hall, her face twisted with rage and fear. She has attacked the court with forbidden magic. This is dark sorcery. Guards seize her. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Gareth and 3 other warriors formed a protective circle around Isla, their bodies between her and any threat. They had shifted back to human form, standing naked and unashamed, and their message was clear. Touch her and answer to us. Declan shifted. The transformation was brutally fast, flesh and bone rearranging with sounds that made even hardened warriors flinch. He strode through the hall, naked in magnificent power rolling off him in waves, and every wolf he passed dropped their gaze in submission. He stopped in front of his mother. Anyone who touches her, Declan said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying to every corner of the hall, answers to me. He turned to face the assembled court. Isla is mine. She is my consort, and she is Luna. The declaration echoed off stone walls. Luna, not consort, not honored guest. Luna, in all things. Seraphine's face went white with fury. You cannot. I can and I have. His eyes blazed. And if anyone in this court questions my authority to choose my Luna, they are welcome to challenge me in ritual combat. Form a line. No one moved. That's what I thought. He crossed to Isla and placed himself between her and the court, his bare back a shield. The ceremony is over. Everyone out. Now. The court filed out in silence, wolves shifting back to human form and dressing quickly, their eyes darting between Isla and the king. When the hall was finally empty, except for Declan, Isla, and the 4 warriors who still guarded her, Declan turned. Are you hurt? His hands ran over her arms, her shoulders checking for injury. I'm fine, Isla managed. Her voice sounded strange, resonant, like the lunarisma had changed something fundamental in her throat. What did I do? You showed them what you are, Gareth said, and there was awe in his scarred face. I've served 3 kings. I've seen battle magic and blood rites and things that would make civilians weep. But that was power older than this fortress. Older than the pack system. Isla looked down at her hands. They were still glowing faintly golden light visible beneath the skin. I didn't mean to. I just felt the wolves shifting, and something inside me responded. Itai, that's how bed works, Thessaly said, emerging from the shadows where she had been watching. The lunarisma is drawn to wolf energy. It amplifies truth. When 200 wolves felt your power, their instincts recognized something their minds couldn't name. Authority older than alphas. Command that doesn't require dominance. They submitted because every cell in their bodies knew you could destroy them if you chose. But I wouldn't, Isla said desperately. I would never. I know. Declan pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her. They'll learn. But tonight you terrified them. And my mother will use that fear to try and eliminate you. As if summoned by her name, Seraphine's voice echoed from the doorway. The council demands an emergency session. Tomorrow at dawn, we will discuss whether the king's judgment has been compromised by dark magic, whether he is still fit to rule. She swept away, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Declan's arms tightened around Isla. She's going to call for a competency review. If she can convince enough of the council that I'm under magical influence, they can strip my crown. Can they do that? Legally, yes. If a majority votes that the king is compromised, they can force abdication. She's been building to this for years, and you just gave her the perfect excuse. Isla pulled back to look at him. Then we fight. Together. Against my mother and half the court. He cupped her face. I won't let them hurt you. And I won't let them take your crown. Isla covered his hands with hers. You said we're partners. That means I fight for you as hard as you fight for me. Declan stared at her for a long moment. Then he kissed her hard and desperate, tasting of fear and love and determination. When they broke apart, Isla could see the resolve settling over him like armor. Then we make sure that when the council convenes tomorrow, we have enough allies to win. The necklace pulsed once against Isla's throat, warm and steady. The battle for Stonehaven had begun. But the battle would not wait for dawn. 2 hours after midnight, as Isla lay awake in Declan's arms, unable to sleep, Raven burst through the door without knocking. Her face was pale with terror, and she thrust a hastily scrawled note into Isla's hands. Kale is here. Your brother arrived an hour ago with 60 warriors. Seraphine let them through the gates. They're demanding your return under blood claim law. The council is convening now in the Great Hall. Declan needs to get there immediately. Declan was already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. How did she move this fast? She's been planning this for weeks, Isla said, her mind racing. The Moonfire was her trigger. She needed me to reveal the Lunarisma so she could call me a threat. And Kale, she met Declan's eyes. My brother wants me back. Not because he cares, because I'm a weapon he can't allow his enemies to wield. Then we go to the Great Hall, Declan said, his voice dropping into that lethal calm, and we end this, tonight. They arrived to find the hall already full, the council seated at a long table, Seraphine at its head, her expression one of cold triumph. And standing before them, all flanked by 60 Ashwood warriors still armed and armored, was Chaol Thorne. Her brother looked exactly as Isla remembered, tall, golden, perfect, his silver wolf just barely contained beneath human skin. His eyes found hers across the hall, and something flickered in them. Not love, not regret, calculation. Isla, Chaol said, and his voice carried the same authority it had the day he exiled her. I invoke blood claim. As your alpha and brother, I demand your return to Ashwood Pack. This king has no right to hold you. Blood claim requires an elder council review, Declan said, stepping forward. Was there a trial before her exile witnesses formal hearing? Chaol's jaw tightened. Family matters do not require. Answer the question, Alpha Thorne. Silence stretched. Then Chaol's eyes flashed with barely contained rage. No, there was no trial. Then your claim is void. Declan's voice was absolute. Isla stays by her own choice. She has no choice, Chaol snarled, and his wolf surged closer to the surface. She's wolfless, defective, and now I hear she's practicing dark magic, attacking innocent wolves with forbidden power. He gestured to the council. I demand she be returned to Ashwood for proper care before she becomes a threat to all the Northern Territories. Seraphine leaned forward. The council agrees. We have called this emergency session to discuss not only the king's compromised judgment, but also the danger this woman poses. Alpha Chaol has generously offered to take custody of his sister. I move that we accept his offer and exile the girl from Stonehaven immediately. I second the motion, Lord Hadrian said. Isla felt the trap closing. They had orchestrated this perfectly. Chaol's arrival, the emergency session, the vote already prepared, but they had made one critical error. They had given her an audience. May I speak? Isla asked, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Seraphine's smile was sharp. Of course, dear. Please, tell the council why we should allow a wolfless girl wielding dark magic to remain in the seat of northern power. Isla stepped forward, and the golden threads in her eyes caught the torchlight. I don't wield dark magic. I carry Lunarisma, the moon's soul, a gift from the goddess herself that hasn't manifested in over 4 centuries. Convenient story, Chaol sneered. You've always been good at lies, sister. But everyone in this room saw what you did at the Moonfire. You attacked the court, made wolves submit against their will. That's not a gift. That's a curse. I showed them truth, Isla said quietly. That's what the Lunarisma does. It doesn't force submission. It reveals what's already there. When I pulsed tonight, every wolf in that hall felt their own instincts recognize something older than pack hierarchy. They submitted because some part of them knew they were in the presence of something sacred. She turned to face the full council. My mother, Elena, carried this same power. She suppressed it her entire life because wolves like you told her it was dark magic. And that suppression killed her, ate her alive from the inside over 20 years until there was nothing left. Isla lifted her chin. I won't make her mistake. I won't hide what I am to make small-minded wolves feel comfortable. The Lunarisma is waking, and it's waking for a reason, to show all of you that strength isn't just fangs and fur, that worth isn't measured by whether you can shift, that there are powers older and greater than any alpha command, and you've spent centuries crushing them because you were afraid. Enough of this, Seraphine said sharply. The girl admits she carries dangerous powers she can barely control. The vote is not yours to call, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. An elderly man stood at the entrance to the great hall, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. His hair was silver white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He wore the formal robes of an Alliance elder, marked with the symbols of all 7 northern territories. Alpha Thaddeus, the oldest living alpha in the territories, retired for a decade but still carrying the authority of his office. Alpha Thaddeus, Seraphine said, and for the first time Isla saw genuine uncertainty in the woman's eyes. This is an internal Stonehaven matter. The Alliance need not. Any matter involving Lunarisma is an Alliance matter. Thaddeus said, his voice surprisingly strong for his age. He walked slowly into the hall, his stick tapping against stone. I received word mere hours ago from my own scouts who witnessed the Moonfire that the Moon Soul had awakened. I came as quickly as these old bones would allow. He stopped in front of Isla and studied her face. Your mother was Elena of Ashwood. Yes, Isla whispered. I knew her. Briefly when we were both young, she had eyes like yours, gold-threaded brown. She ran from the coastal packs because they wanted to use her as a weapon. Seems history has a way of repeating itself. His gaze shifted to Kale. You want to take custody of your sister for her own good? Yes, Kale said. She needs guidance, training, away from political influences. Interesting. Thaddeus turned to Seraphine. And you want her exiled from Stonehaven? For the safety of the court, yes. I see. The old alpha's expression was unreadable. And neither of you has considered asking the girl what she wants. Silence. Thaddeus turned to Isla. Well, child, do you want to return to the pack that exiled you? Do you want to leave Stonehaven? Isla's throat was tight. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. No, she said clearly. I want to stay with Declan, with the people who've shown me kindness when I expected none, with the allies who've risked their lives to protect me. I want to stay and build something better than what came before. Even knowing your presence here will cause conflict, Thaddeus asked. Even knowing half this court fears you, especially because of that. Isla met his eyes. Fear is what my brother used to control me for 24 years. Fear is what made my mother suppress her power until it killed her. Fear is what keeps wolves like Seraphine in power. I'm done being afraid. And I'm done letting fear drive decisions. Thaddeus smiled. It was a small thing, but genuine. Spoken like a true Luna, he turned to the council. I invoke Alliance authority. No vote will be taken tonight. The girl stays at Stonehaven under my protection until a formal Alliance tribunal can be convened to investigate the Lunarisma and determine appropriate protocols. Any attempt to remove her before that tribunal will be considered an act of war against the Alliance itself. Seraphine's face went white. You can't. I can, and I have. Thaddeus's voice hardened. I am the eldest living alpha. I carry Alliance authority whether I sit a throne or not. And I say this matter requires proper investigation, not a midnight vote orchestrated by a power-hungry woman and her puppet. He gestured to Kale. As for you, Alpha Thorn, your blood claim is void due to lack of trial. Your sister is not your property, and your warriors are trespassing in Stonehaven territory. I suggest you leave. Now. Kale's face flushed with rage. But even he couldn't defy an Alliance elder. He turned to Isla one last time. This isn't over, sister. Yes, it is, Isla said quietly. The girl you knew died in Thornridge. I'm someone new now. Someone you have no power over. Kale's eyes burned. Then he spun on his heel and strode from the hall, his warriors trailing behind him. Seraphine stood slowly. This is temporary. When the tribunal convenes, Thaddeus interrupted. They will see what I see. A woman with a rare gift that could benefit all the territories if properly understood. And they will see attempts to suppress that gift for political gain. Think very carefully about what arguments you plan to make, Lady Seraphine. The silver-haired woman said nothing, but the look she gave Isla promised this was far from over. After the hall cleared, only Isla, Declan, Thaddeus, Gareth, Thessaly, and Raven remained. Declan crossed to the old alpha and clasped his arm in the warrior's grip. Thank you, Declan said. You didn't have to come. Actually, I did, Thaddeus replied. The Lunarisma is too important to leave to petty court politics. Besides, your father and I were enemies, which means I have a vested interest in seeing you succeed where he failed. He turned to Isla. The tribunal will convene in 3 weeks. I'll need time to summon alphas from all 7 territories. In the meantime, I suggest you learn to control that power. Because when you stand before those alphas, you'll need to demonstrate that the Lunarisma is a gift, not a threat. I'll be ready, Isla said. I believe you will. Thaddeus smiled again. Your mother would be proud, child. She spent her whole life running from what you're running toward. That takes more courage than most wolves ever find. He left and the hall felt suddenly larger, quieter. Kale lingered near the doorway. Isla saw him hesitate, then approach. I won't apologize, he said quietly. I did what I thought was necessary to protect the pack. I'm not asking for an apology, Isla replied. Kale's jaw worked. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. I see that now. The girl I exiled wouldn't have survived. But you, he met her eyes. You thrived, and I hate that I'm proud of you for it. Then maybe you should question why you hate it. Kale said nothing. He turned and walked away, and Isla knew it was the closest to closure she would ever get from him. It was enough. Isla sagged against Declan, suddenly exhausted. 3 weeks, Declan murmured against her hair. 3 weeks to prepare. Then we prepare, Isla said, together. The 3 weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and discovery. Thessaly worked with Isla every day, teaching her not just control, but understanding. The Lunarisma wasn't something to suppress or fight. It was something to channel, to work with, to trust. Your mother fought it, Thessaly explained during one session in the gardens. She tried to cage it, and the Lunarisma fought back. But you, You're letting it flow. That's why it's waking so smoothly. You're not afraid of it. I am afraid, Isla admitted. Just not afraid enough to let that fear control me. Thessaly smiled. Exactly. Yep, while Isla learned to pulse the lunarisma in controlled bursts, she could now target individual wolves within a crowd, showing them truth without overwhelming everyone present. She learned to heal mending minor wounds with golden light that left no scars. And she learned to sense deception, feeling it like discordant music whenever someone lied in her presence. The court noticed the change. Wolves who had been hostile began to watch her with curiosity instead of fear. Warriors who had dismissed her began to nod in respect when she passed. 1 week before the tribunal, Isla called Raven to the gardens where she trained with Thessaly. I want to try something, Isla said. The lunarisma can heal. Thessaly's been teaching me, and I think I can restore what was taken from you. Raven's eyes widened. She scribbled frantically. My tongue was cut out. There's nothing to heal. The lunarisma doesn't just heal flesh. It heals what was broken. The spirit of the thing. Isla placed her palm against Raven's throat. May I try? Raven nodded, tears already forming. Isla closed her eyes and reached for the lunarisma. It rose to meet her warm and eager, and she channeled it through her palm into Raven's throat. Golden light blazed between them. Raven gasped, and the sound had voice behind it. The light faded. Raven touched her throat with shaking fingers. Can you? Isla whispered. Raven opened her mouth. The word was rough, unpracticed, but real. I can speak. She burst into tears, and Isla pulled her into a fierce embrace while the girl sobbed words into her shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved my life a dozen times, Isla said. This is the least I could do. And then 2 weeks into the preparations, something unexpected happened. Isla fainted during training. Gareth caught her before she hit the ground, and Thessaly was summoned immediately. The old healer examined her, then sat back with a knowing expression. You're pregnant, Thessaly said simply. About 4 weeks along. Isla's hand went to her stomach. Lunarisma bearers are exceptionally fertile, Thessaly explained. Your body is optimized for this. And given what I'm sensing, she placed her palm against Isla's abdomen and closed her eyes. Twins, one carrying lunarisma signature, one carrying alpha wolf energy. Isla's eyes filled with tears. I'm going to be a mother. You're going to be a mother to 2 very special children, Thessaly corrected. Children who will grow up in a world where their mother changed everything. Isla told Declan that evening. He was in his war chamber, reviewing documents for the tribunal when she entered. I need to tell you something, she said. He looked up immediately, reading the seriousness in her expression. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm pregnant. 4 weeks. Twins. Declan stared at her. Then he was across the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees in front of her, pressing his forehead to her stomach. Twins, he whispered. We're going to have twins. One has lunarisma, Isla said softly. One has alpha wolf. Thessaly confirmed it. Declan looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I never thought I'd have this. Family built on love instead of fear. Children who'll grow up knowing they're wanted. Isla ran her fingers through his hair. They'll grow up knowing they're loved. By both of us. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The tribunal is in 1 week, he murmured, and you're going to stand before them carrying our children. They'll see what I see. Strength, courage, the future of the territories. No pressure, Isla said, but she was smiling. You'll be magnificent, Declan promised. You always are. The tribunal convened in Stonehaven's Great Hall exactly 3 weeks after Thaddeus's intervention. 7 alphas sat in judgment, Thaddeus himself presiding. Alpha Sienna from the coastal packs, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Alpha Rowan from the mountain territories, traditional and stern. Alpha Kale from Ashwood, his expression carved from ice. Alpha Mira from the northern reaches, young and progressive. Alpha Torsten from the plains, weathered and practical. And Alpha Declan from Stonehaven, who had recused himself from voting, but sat present as host. 400 wolves packed the gallery. This was no secret court proceeding. This was public judgment on a scale the Northern Territories hadn't seen in decades. Isla stood in the center of the hall wearing a simple dress of midnight blue that Declan had commissioned. The wolf fang necklace rested against her throat. Her hands were clasped over her still, flat stomach where twins grew with impossible speed. Seraphine presented the case against her. Eloquent, damning, carefully constructed. The wolfless girl, the dark magic, the threat to pack hierarchy, the attack at Moonfire, 20 minutes of precise character assassination that left no room for doubt. I move for exile, Seraphine concluded. Remove this threat from the territories entirely. Then it was Isla's turn. She stood alone, no lawyer, no advocate, just herself and the truth. I am Isla Thorne, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 24 years old, exiled from my birth pack for being wolfless. I survived 94 days in Thornridge Forest without pack, without wolf, without anything except the will to keep breathing. And in that survival, I discovered something my mother had hidden from me my entire life. She touched the necklace. This belonged to my grandmother's grandmother. It's been passed down through my mother's line for generations. It's a conduit for Lunarisma, the moon's soul, a gift from the goddess herself. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. My mother, Elena, carried this same power. The coastal pack elders told her it was dark magic. They threatened to kill her if she didn't suppress it. So she did. She pushed it down for 20 years, and it ate her alive from the inside. She died when I was 17, and I didn't understand why until 3 weeks ago. Isla met each alpha's eyes in turn. The Lunarisma isn't dark magic. It's truth, and I can show you. Then demonstrate, Alpha Rowan said gruffly. Show us this power isn't a threat. Isla nodded. She closed her eyes and reached for the Lunarisma. It rose to meet her like a tide, warm and welcoming. She shaped it carefully, precisely, and sent out a pulse. Golden light rippled through the hall. Every wolf felt it. But this time, instead of overwhelming submission, it was gentle. A warm touch against their wolf souls. A reminder of connection. Of pack bonds deeper than alpha commands. Of the goddess's light that lived in all of them. The wolves didn't drop to their bellies, they sighed. Some closed their eyes in something like peace. Others touched their chests as if feeling their own hearts beat for the first time. When the light faded, 400 wolves stood in silence. Not afraid. Awed. That, Isla said quietly, is Lunarisma. Not a weapon, not a threat. A gift that reminds us we're more than hierarchy and dominance. We're connected to something greater. Alpha Sienna spoke first. You could have made us submit. Instead, you soothed us. I could have, Isla agreed. The Lunarisma can command heal or shatter. But I choose healing, because I spent 24 years being made to feel broken, and I won't do that to anyone else. Pretty words, Kale snarled, but power corrupts. How long before you decide to rule us all? Force every alpha to their knees. Isla turned to her brother. I don't want to rule anyone, Kale. I want to be left alone to live my life with the man I love and the children I'm carrying. Gasps from the gallery. Seraphine's face went ashen. That's right, Isla said louder now. I'm pregnant. 9 weeks. Twins. One with Lunarisma. One with Alpha Wolf. The first children born to a Lunarisma bearer in over 400 years. And they'll grow up in a world where I've spent every day proving that strength comes in forms you don't expect. That worth isn't measured by shift. That there are powers older than pack law, and they don't have to be feared. She placed both hands on her stomach. I'm not asking for your permission to exist. I'm telling you exist. The Lunarisma exists, and you can either spend the next century trying to suppress it like the wolves who came before you, or you can accept it. Learn from it. Let it teach you that the world is bigger than you thought. Silence stretched for a long moment. Then Alpha Thaddeus stood. I call for a vote. All in favor of recognizing Isla Thorn as Luna of Stonehaven, holder of Lunarisma, and removing all charges against her. Hands rose. Thaddeus, Sienna, Mira, Torsten. After a moment's hesitation, Rowan 5 of 7. Motion passes, Thaddeus declared. Isla Thorn is recognized as Luna of Stonehaven. The Lunarisma is acknowledged as a sacred gift, not dark magic, and any attempt to harm or remove her will be considered an act of war against the Alliance. He turned to Seraphine. As for you, Lady Seraphine, evidence has been brought to my attention regarding your role in the poisoning of Isla Thorn. Financial records showing payments to kitchen staff, testimony from servants who feared for their lives if they didn't cooperate. You have violated the most sacred law of Pack. You attempted to murder a Luna. Seraphine's face was rigid. You have no proof. I have Raven's testimony, Thaddeus said. The girl stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice rang clear across the hall. I heard every conversation, every threat, every payment Lady Seraphine authorized. I have written it all down, and I will testify to every word. The crowd gasped. Raven could speak. Thaddeus gestured to Gareth. And I have the sworn statement of Captain Gareth, who investigated the poisoning and traced the Wolf's Bane to a supplier you've used for 30 years. Seraphine said nothing. The council votes on your fate, Thaddeus announced. All in favor of exiling Seraphine Blackmore from Stonehaven and all Northern Territories for attempted murder of a Luna. 7 hands rose. Even Kale, who had no love for Isla, voted for justice, unanimous. You are hereby exiled, Thaddeus declared. You will leave Stonehaven within the hour. You will not return to any territory under Alliance protection. And if you are found within our borders after sunset, you will be executed on sight. Seraphine stood slowly. Her ice blue eyes found Isla's across the hall. You think you've won, But power like yours always destroys everything it touches. I'll be watching from the shadows when it all comes crashing down. Then you'll be watching for a very long time, Isla said quietly. Because I'm not going anywhere. Seraphine swept from the hall. Declan stood slowly. Isla crossed to him and placed her hand over his heart. Are you all right? She asked quietly. She was my mother, he said, voice rough, and I just watched her be exiled for trying to kill you. I should feel something. Grief. Regret. But all I feel is relief. That's not wrong, Isla said. She stopped being your mother a long time ago. He covered her hand with his. I know. But it still feels like losing something. You're not losing anything, Isla said. You're making room for what we're building. Together. Declan pulled her close and the hall erupted in cheers. It was over. She had won. The twins were born in late spring when the mountain snows had melted to rushing streams and the meadows below Stonehaven blazed with wildflowers. Cassian came first, dark-haired, amber-eyed, with a wolf that manifested at age 4 and made the healers gasp. Powerful, controlled, exactly like his father. Seren followed 6 minutes later, golden-eyed, quiet or watchful. Her lunarisma manifested at age 3 when she healed an injured bird by touching it with light. Now at 5 years old, they raced through Stonehaven's corridors like matched storms, leaving chaos and laughter in their wake. Isla stood on the battlements at sunset, watching them play in the courtyard below. Cassian in wolf form, small but fierce. Seren trailing golden light as she chased him, giggling. They're going to tear down the fortress stone by stone, Declan said, appearing beside her. Probably, Isla agreed, but they'll rebuild it better. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. 5 years and the touch still sent warmth through her. The Alliance is meeting next month. 12 territories now instead of 7. Your reforms spread faster than anyone expected. Good, Isla leaned into him. The wolf fang necklace hung warm against her throat, and beneath it, a second necklace. A gift from Declan on their bonding ceremony. 2 wolves intertwined. In 5 years, so much had changed. Raven served as Stonehaven's mistress of communications, her voice restored, and her sharp mind making her invaluable. Gareth had trained 50 new warriors in honor-based combat, spreading Declan's reforms throughout the territories. Thessaly led the Alliance Healing Council, teaching young healers across all 12 territories. And Kael had been overthrown in a bloodless coup 2 years ago. His people had elected a new alpha, a woman named Brenna, who believed in merit over bloodline and had immediately implemented Isla's reforms. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, but changing. What are you thinking? Declan asked. That my mother was right. Isla touched the pendant, feeling its ancient heartbeat against her skin. She told me I carried more than I knew, more than I could have imagined that day in Thornridge when I thought I was going to die. You carried everything we needed, Declan said. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Everything we needed to build something new. Below, Cassian and Seren's laughter echoed off stone walls. The future of the Northern Territories. A boy with his father's strength and his mother's heart. A girl with her mother's gift and her father's courage. The sun set behind the western peaks, turning the sky copper and violet. Isla closed her eyes and felt the lunarisma pulse in her chest. Warm, steady, content. She was alive. She was loved. She had remade the world that tried to erase her, and it was only the beginning.